Welcome, listeners, to another episode of the Ripple Intent podcast. I am one of your delightful hosts, John Grant, and with me, as always, is Kyle. Kyle, say hello.
Hello, delightful host.
So, for those of you who are new to the Ripple Intent podcast, Ripple Intent is a nonprofit organization which is focused on helping you become a better person, better teammate, better all-around colleague for the people you work with. We host events throughout the country where you can get together with other people and talk about issues in the workplace. And oh my gosh, guys, I just lost that one. My mind went three different directions. So Chef,
I know it's hard to describe what we do. It
totally
really is.
Megan, we should have had you do the intro.
Yeah. We should have. Well, I mean, our guest today, Megan, and I'll let you introduce her, John, but I'm really curious to hear because we have struggled with trying to communicate what it is that our breakfast clubs do and provide and what the experience is and all that stuff. Yet she showed up, and not only did she show up to a handful of them, she suddenly said, "Hey, I want to help facilitate these." So yeah, you're right. She should have done the intro. She probably could have done better than you and I.
Seriously. That's not a joke. All right. Do you want me to start all the way from the top? You just want to pause and then clip?
Oh, no, we're using this.
Done.
Perfect. I love it. I love it. Definitely our guest today. Our guest is actually way better at understanding Ripple Intent and what we do and how it impacts the people who participate. So without further ado, please welcome Megan Schroeder. Megan, introduce yourself for our listeners.
Thanks. Hey, everybody. I'm Megan, and I've been involved with Ripple Intent for, I don't know how long, really. But yeah, I think like a lot of people, I came to the first one because a friend and mentor, Meredith Myers, was like, you should do this. And I was like, okay, sure. It's an easy thing to just show up and free breakfast, and that sounds good to me. And then I was like, oh, this is really like what I am really passionate about in life, and that's people and understanding how we work and how we tick and how we can show up as our best selves. So, and then I also do business development for Degenkolb Engineers in San Diego, structural engineering firm, and I really love my job. So
that's awesome. Well, so number one, we have a guest who really loves their job. So that's amazing, and we should probably peel that apart. I love that you can't remember how long you've been participating with Ripple Intent because now it just feels like forever, right? So one of the things
it's still so new that it hasn't worn out, right? We're still in the honeymoon phase.
It's still so new that I get really nervous facilitating, and I'm like, I have no right to talk about any of this stuff. And then, we get to the end, and I'm like, oh, people liked it.
Yeah.
Which is really credit to you both.
Oh, well, I mean, you got to facilitate with Val. Since we're name dropping, may as well throw that out there too. Yeah. And, you know, like she said, you guys were like spiritually connected by the time you got to San Diego. So, you know, from a facilitation standpoint, it's really funny because we talk about this when we go into these things about how sometimes the people who attend our events expect us to be the experts in whatever it is we're talking about. And you and I have talked about this multiple times about being very intentional about not trying to become that expert. Not even, I mean, there's preparation and there's conversation and there's all those things that go into it in order to put on a good, solid breakfast club. So there is the effort there. But what doesn't happen is our deep dive in studying and research on the actual topic. What we do bring is that facilitation intent in our own personal experience and try to echo to everybody that we are on the journey with you. And so when we've been pointed to with those questions about, oh, that's a great question. What do you think, Megan? Because you're standing up there. It's like, oh, that's a, or what's the right answer? Or, oh, you're judging us because we're not having the right conversation. It's like being aware of that and telling everybody, no, I might be one step ahead of you, but that's just because I saw the slides before we got here. That's it. So, and you've seen how that gets received by the people who attend, even the ones who have been there so many times and they keep coming back. They recognize that we are going through this usually together. And that's what makes this so cool, and why people tell you afterwards, wow, that was great. You did a fantastic job. So it's, the way that you do that, and the way that you learn to do that, and the way you continue to do that is why you get those compliments and continue to get the compliments. And I don't know if the nervous thing ever goes away, honestly. Yeah. I really don't think it ever does.
I feel like there's a vulnerability there with the nerves of like that, like exactly what you just talked about. It's vulnerable to get up in front of people and say, hi, I'm going to help like try to lead this conversation, but I actually also don't know what I'm talking about. Like, so we're all in this together. Like that's the vulnerability and the nervousness. I think that's very natural.
Well, I think it's part of, like you had mentioned to us earlier, talking about the journey into you, right? So I guess to make sure that our listeners are tracking, right? We're kind of talking about, you came to a breakfast club early on, and right. So a breakfast club is a 90-minute session where we get down and we have facilitated conversation with a group of 30 to 50 of what will become your best friends, of other people in the industry, talking about topics, from trust to curiosity to conflict, all sorts of topics. They vary every single time, right? And so then, Megan, you went and you were like, hey, I want to get up there and do that. And we said, sure, that would be great. And you're really great at it. So it does take a lot of courage to get up in front of people and be vulnerable, because you're experiencing the topic just like they are, right? And the facilitators, we're not experts, we're just people. We've given it a little bit of thought ahead of time. So I'd love for you to tell us a little bit more, like kind of take that, you launch off of, why facilitating these events, why is that something you are drawn to, and how does that kind of relate to your journey into you?
I think, like, not to get too kind of, I don't know, cliche or whatever, but like at the end of the day, like we're all in this together and we're all just like trying to do our best and like failing a lot, like, and it's hard. And I think that when we can talk about that, there's a lot of like really beautiful things that happen and a lot of really deep connection and validation, and just being seen and heard, I think, is a very fulfilling and wonderful way to kind of feel in life. And I think there's a shift that a lot of people, I think, talk about in not a great way sometimes, of like the millennial generation kind of came into the workplace and they were one of the first generations to look at the workplace and say, I want to get a lot out of this. Like I want to get my financial means out of this. I want to get something that I hopefully care about doing. And I want to get some emotional like fulfillment or some emotional validation and things like that. And so that kind of like request is hard to fill. And I don't think can be like fully accomplished by the workplace alone. But I think when we talk about what we're going through in our personal and professional lives and how there's so much crossover, like especially with these topics that we cover at the breakfast clubs, that opens up for a really productive like conversations, a really productive work environment, and yeah, that deeper understanding of each other, that compassion towards others and compassion towards yourself. I think just like is really powerful and really fosters like amazing growth and amazing accomplishments. I'm a big believer in the idea that like kind of with the strengths finders and all of that kind of stuff is like we can grow so much better if we focus on our positives and our strengths and treat ourselves with kindness than we will if we try to like hate ourselves into being great, like constantly waking up and looking and being like, here's how I can be better than I was yesterday. Like, I failed in all these ways. I have to change all these things about me. Like, I don't think that's a great method to achieve like long term success and long term kind of fulfillment, I guess. So I think that was like a big thing that attracted me to being as involved as I could be. And you guys let me do that when I asked. So that was the other piece.
Hey, you brought it up. Can we go down the age thing for just a minute?
Yeah.
Because we were working on something the other day, and I completely stereotyped generations, and you called me out and were like, yeah, you're wrong. Actually, you didn't even call me out. You just told me I was wrong. And reframed it for me to so we were talking about what people desire for in their 20s, house, kids, family, all that stuff, and maybe even in their early 30s. And you were like, yeah, where I live, that's not even feasible, the whole house thing. It's just not practical. It's not realistic. And you reframed it and said, this is actually what I see people looking for in that age range and striving for first before those things. And so I'm curious to know, for all the negativity that every younger generation that has come into the workforce in the history of time, we have heard the exact same things. They don't do this, they don't do that, da, 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 da. And that's how, old people get their stereotypes, is you get the same stuff. And so I'm curious to hear, is what you're describing, is that unique to you, or is that amongst those that you work with that are in the same generation?
I think it's more common in people of my generation. And I think also, you attract the type of people that like you kind of are in a lot of ways. And so I think I also have a lot of people that I'm surrounded by that we have these conversations a lot. And so, yeah, so I think that's true. But in general, I think the workplaces, it's like everyone says, like for the first time ever, we have 5 different generations in the workplace at the same time. And I think there's something to learn from all of those generations. And I think that's another cool thing about kind of the breakfast clubs and kind of these topics is like we all might approach, let's just say like conflict, because that's kind of an easy one. Because again, the millennial generation is stereotypically horrible at conflict. They are very avoidant. So every generation approaches conflict differently, but there's something to learn from every generation about conflict and about how we could maybe do it better, and how because of some of my like generational kind of things, I am going to come to the table with a different approach to conflict than both of you, just naturally. And so if we can have that conversation, I think that's really powerful. And yeah, I don't know if I'm answering your question.
No, you actually have, because you're right. I'll go back to the like attracts like, regardless of age. I think you're right. The generational piece, not just on conflict, but then also on roles, responsibilities, titles in the workplace. We're in the same boat. Worked with all kinds of generations, and history does obviously repeat itself. What I was curious about was, do you think that what you're professing is your interest is common amongst your peers?
Yes, yeah, I do.
So that surprises me, John. I don't know about you, but that I would say that I think everybody is interested in what you're talking about in some way, shape, or form. It's part of the reason why we keep doing what we do. We don't have these conversations as often as we should, and we certainly don't have them frequently at work, because, like we've heard from so many great business leaders over the years, is 95% of the workforce or the workday is focused on tasks and getting things done, the easy, tangible stuff that you can measure and all that stuff. And when you get into the human side of work, it actually gets kind of hard. It's difficult. It's uncomfortable. We're not good at it. We haven't practiced it. We'll occasionally watch a YouTube video or a TED Talk or bring in a speaker, and they'll be like, "Oh, that was fun. Okay, back to work." And so we've always struggled in having some of these conversations, but you have found not just success in having them, but a welcoming atmosphere of having these kinds of discussions. And they don't all have to be deep. I think that's one of the things too that I've heard a lot, that if you're going to talk about any of this stuff, it has to go really, really deep. And oftentimes it really doesn't, and can still be very meaningful. So for those of you listening, she's shaking her head yes. Okay.
Sorry. I was also just thinking of, because I was thinking about like how, when I talk to people in my generation about what ripple intent is, it seems to hit kind of easy. Like I say, oh, it's ripple intent, and we talk about how we can all work together as like human beings. So we talk about different topics around our emotions. And it kind of hits like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. I love that. But I was also thinking of this very funny. So I was getting an Uber to go to the airport, to go to Sacramento to talk about trust. And I got in the Uber, and it was this gal, and she said, "Oh, where are you headed?" And I said, "Oh, I'm going to Sacramento. Why?" I said, "I'm going to help kind of lead a conversation about trust." And she said, "Oh, are you a banker?" And I was like, "No, no, I'm not." And she was like, "Okay." And then we kind of like went a little bit longer, and she's like asking me what I do. And I told her, and it wasn't until I was at the airport sitting waiting for my flight that I realized that she thought that I was leading a conversation about banking trusts.
Oh.
And so that's why she asked me what to bank.
Okay.
I was like, okay. What was going on?
Wow. I was really wondering how she got to the banker right off the bat. I was like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Because when I think, like when I think about trusting relationships, I think about bankers first.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or insurance people. Let's lump them all together. It's so now wait a second. If people are listening to this, and for the handful of you who are listening to this, you got to be wondering, what do you actually do for a living, Megan? You got to be in like HR or something like that.
I do business development, and which is, speaking of kind of professions that we all naturally trust.
So business development is code for I do sales, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And for what kind of firm?
Structural engineering.
Structural engineering. So sales for a structural engineering firm.
I sell how to keep your building standing during an earthquake. Yeah, I started in the industry actually on the MEP side, and that the firm I was with, they did everything except civil and structural. And so then this was a kind of shift over to the world of structural, which has been really interesting to learn about, because I'm sure you both have talked to many structural engineers across your lifetime that can tell you about seismicity and all kinds of things that I still struggle to understand. But yeah, I have a marketing background, and I kind of got a business degree because I didn't know what I wanted to do in life. And so business kind of covers everything. And And then when I found this industry, I just thought it was really amazing, to be honest. Like, I thought that's such a cool thing, like to build a building that people are going to actually use. Um, and then the way that some people, can talk about the spaces that they're designing and creating, um, from the big stuff to the small stuff of how it's going to influence the people that use that space. Like, and now I think about that a lot more. Like, I'm also kind of obsessed with airports. And so every time I go into an airport, I think about like how it was either well done or maybe they missed some things about how an airport functions, because you think about the amount of people that are going through an airport at any given day, like it's massive. And so if something doesn't work for the way that people move within that space, you notice it. Like, and also if something works well, like the San Francisco airport, you walk out of security and they have these huge water bottle filling stations. And it's so cool. And it makes I never have my own water bottle to fill, but I always like nod to the water station. Like, that's great.
I gotcha. Yeah.
Water station, I see you. I got it right in here in my heart. I'm holding place for you.
Exactly. So that's kind of like the thing that initially attracted me to the overall AEC industry. And then business development, like I said, I've always really liked people. And so I think how that role seemed to involve a lot of people, going to talk to people, like the kind of, again, stereotypical view of business development of out on the golf course and going to all the parties and all that kind of stuff. Like, I think that was the initial attraction. I was like, yeah, that sounds right up my alley. And then learning more about what it all entailed, and trying to connect with other teams and other people within the industry and see how we can work together if we can find something that is mutually beneficial. That kind of deepened that interest. And so that's kind of what led to me being where I'm at and enjoying it, because I'm getting to do some of that strategy and some of the people, and that combination makes me kind of jump out of bed in the morning, to be honest.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. So I want to tie something back in here, because you had mentioned to us, so traditionally when we think of salespeople, we don't necessarily think of, right, people who are, we don't automatically go to deep conversations or high EQ or anything like that. So you've got this aspect of you that is really looking at you growing as a human, right? You have the sales side of you, and you had mentioned to us how you see this tie between your role and how you help other people be better humans. And that's not a place I automatically go when I think of business development or sales. So help us understand, right? What does that look like to you? How does that show up?
Yeah. I think for me, like, again, we'll go back to the airports, I guess, just because, again, I love airports. If I knew of somebody who is maybe equally as passionate about airports as I am, and also has the, architecture or engineering or construction, like, technical side, and then I can put all of those people in a room together and they can build the San Francisco airport, that feels incredible to me. That feels like I got to help somebody who's passionate about structural engineering and how to keep people safe in a building, in case of an emergency, or somebody who's passionate about art and wants to bring art to an airport space for maybe the first time. If I could connect all of those people together, that feels like the ultimate kind of accomplishment for me in my mind. And so that's, I think, why I think of the helping people when I think of business development, because I get the opportunity to be that person. And I think that kind of also ties back into some of the EQ pieces of talking to people. Like I love getting to actually know people and know what their passion is and what really drives them, more than just, oh, what are you working on? And I would actually say in some ways, like I kind of joke to my boss that I'm bad at business development because I'm much better at that piece than kind of anything else. I'll go to a lunch or a coffee or something like that and come back from it like knowing that person on a deeper level and being like, okay, how can we help this person like do whatever they said they want to do, but also like know that I know them a little bit and can maybe connect them with people who have a similar working style or a similar approach.
I remember when we did the Breakfast Club on connection, and we talked about the questions about how to establish a good connection with other people and be intentional and present and all that stuff. Somebody said, wow, those are the questions we need to teach our business development people. Yeah. And what you just described is what, it's interesting. I think we do. It goes back to John's thing about the perception of the position or the sales or the BD role, where it often comes across as mechanical or fake. And you can feel that. I mean, it's something, I've always said it, you can't fake authenticity, and people try. And, oh, yeah, tell me about, I wrote down some notes after we met last time. And so you have 3 kids and, half a dog and 2 cars and and I'll come back and I'll revisit those. And then we'll talk about what I can sell for you. And that's a very, I don't want to say traditional, but that's the experience that I've had when it comes to a lot of folks in your role. And you, not to say that there are some pretty awesome souls out there who have the conversations like you do, because they do put their own, I would say, whether it's their own, their implied, the company pressure of agenda aside and go, okay, who am I actually sitting with? And is there a true opportunity for us to work together? And what would that look like? And in order to understand that, I actually have to find out about them. And that's where you say you're not good at it. You're absolutely not good at what I think John and I have experienced for the bulks of our career. So please don't ever get good at that.
Yeah, I do think I have been very fortunate in being with a team and a firm that values a personal connection, and that I don't have to come back to the table every single Friday and have 15 new leads or anything like that. They value the overall approach of working with people that we get along with and that we can accomplish great things together. And I also have been very fortunate in having a lot of really great mentors within the space. And one of those people very early on said to me, like, I said, oh, I'm feeling really like nervous, or I'm feeling really stressed that like, what if this person doesn't like me? And she was like, who cares? Like, that doesn't matter. Like, not everyone has to like you and not everyone is going to like you. And that's really okay. And also it's really cool because somebody might not like me, but they might like someone else in my firm. And that's great. And they can have that relationship. And I don't have to be kind of in everything. Which I think is also kind of, again, I don't know, I hate to go back again, but I think that's another thing that's cool about these conversations is not everyone, you don't have to be good at all of the emotions or all of the strengths. Like you can be really good at building trust and really bad at conflict, and use your ability to gain people's trust or keep people's trust to kind of help supplement times that you might find yourself in conflict. So that's, I think, what's really great about all of these conversations is that they kind of all build on and around each other, and building that knowing yourself piece is awesome.
Well, that's where we started. You got to tell me. So your favorite quote, because you have a fantastic favorite quote.
My favorite quote is, "Who were you before they told you who you were supposed to be?" And I think it's just great to take a step back at like some of the things that you think, like I think me thinking that I need to get everyone to like me in the industry in order for me to be good at business development. Like, where's that actually coming from? Do I actually have a desire for everyone to like me? Because that sounds kind of exhausting in reality. And so, who were you before that? Who were you before somebody told you that you needed to be an engineer or anything like that? Or, maybe that was what you were supposed to be before somebody told you that you needed to do business. Like, I don't know. But I just think it's a really great like question to ask yourself and dive into.
Well said. Good quote.
Do you find that you're pushing back against that?
Pushing back against
who they told you were supposed to be? Is that easy? Is that hard?
I think it's easy in certain moments and really hard in other moments. I think there's pieces of like business development, I think, was something that when I figured out like what it was, I really just really wanted to do that. And so anybody telling me that my kind of journey to trying to do business development wasn't, the traditional path or anything like that, that was somewhat easy to let go of those kind of societal pressures or industry pressures or whatever it is. But I think there's other things that are really hard to, like, I guess, I don't know, to get very personal, but I don't want children. And I think that's been a really interesting thing that I really looked at. Why did I at one point in my life think that I wanted kids? And where was that pressure coming from? Who was that pressure coming from? And what would happen if I looked into what would my future look like without kids? And from that kind of like introspective evaluation, I guess, I don't know if those words are supposed to go together. I realized that I didn't want kids, and the things that I thought that I wanted about kids, or having my own kids, I guess I should say, were things that I felt like I was accomplishing or could be fulfilled by in other ways. For example, with my nieces and nephews, and also through kind of mentoring and volunteering opportunities. And that was enough for me. But that was a really hard thing to like think through and push back. And it still is, because I still get a lot of people who are like, "Are you sure you don't want kids?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm pretty sure." But, and I always tell people like, you always keep your mind open because you never know what's going to happen. But I think there's certain things that people have a lot of opinions on, and there's other things that you just kind of know so distinctly that anyone's opinions, you kind of just easily in one ear and out the other, because you're just kind of, and I'm a pretty stubborn person as well, so that helps with that whole journey.
Well, if you are ever interested in hearing 10 times the amount of opinions, go ahead and have a kid, because you will be inundated with opinions.
My nieces are pretty good about giving me their thoughts on my life already, so I can only imagine.
That's awesome.
We appreciate you sharing that. I am fascinated by you and your approach. I think that's part of the reason we wanted to have you here, because we find you incredibly intriguing. And honestly, the way you see yourself relative to your job is it's refreshing. And I'm I'm excited to know you and to, hear how that works for you. I think you're, for other people in the same role, to hear from you and that this is possible and you can be successful and, you can do sales and have it not be about you, right? I mean, that's awesome, with your personal philosophy. So we really appreciate you being here and sharing that with us today.
There is a great book that I would recommend to anyone that's ever been at all curious about business development or sales. It's called The Go Giver, and it is that exact approach. It's the idea that if you approach sales with a giving attitude, that you're going to accomplish more than if you approach it with the go getter kind of attitude. So it's a great book.
Awesome. Sounds great. I'll add it to my list. So, well, Megan, thanks for being here with us today. Again, we really appreciate you spending some time with us. And listeners, thanks for joining us for another episode. We will see you next time.